Hey everyone, and welcome to my office. You probably recognize this bookcase right there where I keep my yarn. I mentioned in my last episode that I would most likely film a few videos of my latest sweater design, and I kind of just wanted to talk about my design process and the resources that I have found useful, and just kind of like how I organize everything and just how I go about designing a garment. So, full disclosure, this is the first garment that I've ever designed. I have worked on a few patterns, like I have just kind of come up with a really simple design and written out the pattern and graded it across multiple sizes just to kind of get an understanding of how that works. So I've done that a couple of times, but I've never like released an actual garment pattern. So if all goes well, this will be my first garment pattern. So I am not a knitwear designer. I don't really know what I'm doing, and I'm also not I'm not extremely, it's the neighbors. Because I don't do this full time, I am not incredibly particular about my process, so I kind of just do what works for me in the moment. I'm just figuring it out as I go, and I don't have like an incredibly streamlined process, and I don't know that I don't really have like a way of doing things, and then like every time I make a pattern I always do it that way, because I've only put out a few patterns, and again, like I've never come out with a garment pattern before. Like this is kind of my first time doing all of this. So I just wanted to, if you were stumbling across this video and you don't know who I am, I just wanted to make sure that you know I'm not a knitwear designer, but I just do it as a hobby and thought it would be fun to document the process, because I know that a lot of full-time designers don't necessarily want to give away their like secrets and their tips and all of that. Some of them do, but I think the majority don't, or they just don't have the time to document the process, which is totally valid and fair. But I don't rely on this as my income. I have another income. This is just, again, something I do for fun as a hobby. It's on the side. So yeah, I don't mind telling you about where I get my information and all of that. So hopefully you find this at least interesting, but hopefully it's also useful if you are kind of getting into knitwear design or just want to know how someone else approaches it. So yeah, I'll show you what I have knit so far. My process is, I like to design the project before I end up knitting it. So I think I have like one shawl that I kind of like designed it as I was knitting it, but for the most part, I like to fully design the entire thing before I begin knitting the sample. And actually sometimes I like to grade it completely before I knit the sample as well. For this one, I wanted to make sure that the sample worked out before I did all of the work to grade it, because as I mentioned in the beginning, I have several patterns that I have graded through all the sizes and then decided not to knit the sample and not to release the pattern. And I just was doing that for the experience, but this one I really, this is a sweater that I'm knitting solely for myself, and again, I don't really need to, I don't rely on this income, and so I don't really need to like conform to the trends or come out with something that I think is going to get a lot of traction or be very popular, because it's just not why I'm doing this. I don't ever plan to make money off of this. This is purely just something I'm doing for fun. I like the math, I like the technical writing. My major is technical communication, so it's just something that I find fun, and it's just a way for me to be creative. So I'm not trying to design something that is very trendy or that other people will love. You know, but if other people do like it, that's very flattering. And I hope that other people do, but that's not the sole reason why I'm knitting this. My like purpose in designing this was something that I want in my wardrobe. So, and also that I want to knit. So that's kind of the inspiration for this piece. So I'll show you the front. I have the front completely finished. This is I'll describe it really quickly. This is a bottom-up modified drop shoulder sweater. The front and the back are knit flat, and then this is what I have planned so far, at least. And then the sleeves, the stitches will be picked up and knit top down in the round. So it is a reverse stockinette based sweater with cables down the front and the back. So here's the body, and it's wow, can't talk. It is also a cropped sweater. Today's my day off, by the way. It is Independence Day. It's a holiday here in the States, and it's my day off, so I'm not trying to be like super, you know, great at talking, basically. Okay. Yeah, so here it is. These really cool cables down the front. Oops. And the cable kind of reminds me of like a knit stitch. So that was kind of the inspiration behind that. Yeah, and like I mentioned, it is slightly cropped because I am short and I like the majority of my sweaters cropped. It has 2x2 ribbing, the bottom, and then because this is a modified drop shoulder, it's just got a little bit of armhole shaping, but not too much. It's still really simple and really easy. And then of course some neckline shaping, and then you finish off at the shoulders. And I will most likely be grafting the shoulders via a 3-needle bind off. So I just have the stitches held on a piece of waist yarn. So that's the front. I just finished it last night, and I wrote out the entire pattern for the front, and I just started on the back, and I've also written out the pattern for the back as well. So there's still a few spots that kind of need to be rewritten or double checked or just reworded in a better way. And I'll show you the pattern. I'll actually show you what I have so far. And the way that I approached designing this sweater is I am just working on this sample size, and this size is my size. And it's one of the medium sizes. So I'll need to grade up and down when I grade this pattern. And it's a little bit risky, I think, to knit a sweater and then grade it. I feel like I'm more comfortable with completely grading the sweater, or grading the majority of the sweater, and then knitting the sample and making sure that that all works out, because grading is more than just simply doing calculations. You know, there's a lot of like judgment calls, and sometimes a sweater in a larger or smaller size just isn't going to look right, or it's not going to look similar enough. Something like that. And so it's nice to grade it first before you actually knit the sample, so that you out if it doesn't work in a larger size, then you can change those design elements before you knit it. That way everything works out. Basically, you're not having to like double your workload or rip out a bunch of knitting or something like that. But as I mentioned, I'm knitting this sweater for myself, and if it doesn't work out grading wise for some reason, this is a really simple design and it should work out, but if for some reason it doesn't, then I just won't publish the pattern. So it's not that big of a deal to me. I'm at a point now where I need to go read the pattern and double check myself, so I'm gonna pause the video here and I'll talk to you in a little bit later. Okay, so I know that this isn't the best way to film my screen. This is just how I'm going to do it for now, though. I didn't necessarily want to use an actual screen recorder because I do hope to sell this pattern at some point, so I don't necessarily want to give away everything in the pattern, and I feel like you would just be able to read everything really easily that way, so I'm just going to film it this way. Again, this is not going to be incredibly technical or anything like that, so hopefully you find it interesting though. So I just wanted to kind of show you, I guess, some of the way that I organize a new pattern, and this of course is specific to a sweater. So I use Google Drive for basically everything. It is free. I can access it from anywhere because it is cloud-based, and it has the majority of what I need it for. If I need to do anything more complicated, I will use the Microsoft Office suite or program, whatever it's called. You know what I'm talking about. I'll use that if I need to. But for the most part, Google Drive is really useful for me. And I have different Google accounts, and so I can keep my design and all of my knitting in a different drive than my like school and work and all of that. So anyway, I have a folder, and I create a folder for each design so that I can put all of the documents associated with that design in one place. And here I will put everything from spreadsheets that I use to different documents that contain different things. So I'll just kind of quickly go through what I have so far. This isn't comprehensive because I haven't finished the design yet, but this is what I have at this stage in the design. So first we have the actual pattern, and I keep all of the notes for the pattern in here. So that means notes for myself as well as the actual pattern written out. So some things are like basically completely finished and polished, and they are ready to go and ready to be put in the actual pattern. And then some things are just notes for myself, and then some things are really quick notes that I need to finish editing. But I wanted to show you first this part of the pattern here. So one thing that I did for this sweater is I noted my key measurements. So these are all of the measurements that are important to know for the type of sweater that I'm designing. For other types of sweaters, it might be good to know other types of measurements. But for my sweater, these were the key measurements that I wanted. And you can see bust circumference, bust width, crossback width, which is the total width of your sweater after you decrease for the armholes. Shoulder width, length from bottom to base of armholes. I just realized that said rubbing and I meant ribbing. Armhole depth, length from base of armhole to base of front neck, length from base of front neck to base of shoulder, and shoulder shaping, which is the total length of the shoulder shaping. So I actually ended up changing the shoulder shaping to about 1 inch and changed this to about 2 inches. So you can see, like, you know, you can plan out your sweater or your design, and you know, things are gonna change. That's just kind of how it goes, at least for me, especially because I don't really know what I'm doing. So I realized after I knit this the way it was, and kind of modeled it a little bit on my body, I realized I actually wanted the neckline to be a little bit deeper, and so I just changed it to these measurements instead. So this is kind of nice just to kind of have at the top of the document so that I can reference them. And I also like to incorporate where I'm putting ease in, if I do put ease in, so that I know for the other sizes exactly how much ease I used for my sample size. There are parts of this document where I will write down my formula. So this is a formula that I figured out of where to place the cables. And this is important because I will use this to grade the other sizes. So yes, I already figured out the numbers for this size, but rather than just figuring out the numbers, I wanted to figure out a formula so that I can grade the other sizes. And then I also just have, sizes, suggested yarn. You can see I haven't written that out yet. I want to come up with various types of yarns to suggest, so that I'm not just suggesting one yarn, especially because I'm using Quince & Company, which is a really nice yarn. It's also an expensive yarn, and I did purchase it with my money, but I just wanted a really nice yarn to work with, and I know that, I don't have money to do that for every sweater I knit, so I want to include different types of yarn. Now we're actually getting into the pattern, and you can tell like all of this I need to flesh out still, so it's definitely not by any means finished. And you can also see that for some things that I have comments on, this says edit ? Because I might want to kind of edit that section, and then these other comments say rewrite. So sometimes as I am writing the pattern out, I will just kind of highlight and make a comment to myself to make sure that I remember, like, this isn't finished yet. It may look finished, but I might want to edit this, or I might want to rewrite, just to kind of draw attention to it, because patterns can be really big documents and it can be really easy to miss things, especially if they look finished. Like this section might look finished, but you know what, maybe it's not. So it's just an easy way for me to remember, make sure that this is good to go before you put it in the actual pattern, because it's really easy to just like miss stuff. So you can see here I've just kind of like written out some special techniques and just a couple things that I want to make sure that I include in the pattern. Not sure entirely where that's going to go yet. We'll probably go about here in the pattern, but I just wanted to kind of get it out of my head and onto the document. And now we're getting into the actual pattern. So another thing that I do when I don't necessarily know all of the numbers yet, I haven't graded the pattern yet, or I don't know exactly what I want to do in this section, but I just want to get the basics of the section written out, is I will just use placements for where the numbers will end up going. And the main reason I do this is so that I don't forget that I want to make sure to note how many stitches are remaining at the end of this row. So if I just left this off completely, I can make a note to myself, but in some ways it's kind of easier for me to visualize this so that I know I need to fill in these numbers still. So I know that I know these numbers, I figured these out, but I haven't figured out how many stitches will remain at the end of this section. So that's just another tip. And then one other thing is, on certain sections, I will actually comment, and I don't know if there's a better way to do this, but this is just the way that I do it for now. I will comment my size range so that I know, I can see it right next to the arm size section, that this size is 36, this size is 40, 44, 48, right? So I know what those sizes are, just so I don't get confused or mixed up or something like that. And you can tell, like, this is not written out. These are kind of things that I still need to figure out. Okay, I had to take a really long break, but this is marniemclean.com, and as you can see, she has moved her website, but her old website is archived, and this is the article that I used to figure out how to grade in Excel or Google Spreadsheets. And she just details some really great formulas to use and ways to get your spreadsheet set up so that it makes it so much easier and quicker to grade. And this is a really great article. I will link the URL in the description of this video so you can check it out. Definitely recommend it. So yeah, that's what I used to figure out this grading. And then the last thing that I wanted to show you was this spreadsheet, which I used to figure out the neckline shaping. And you can pretty easily, you could make a separate tab like in your grading spreadsheet to do these kinds of things, but I like to just create a separate spreadsheet with other sections of the design that I need to chart things out. So for the neckline, it's, this is kind of a very simplistic way of doing it, but it's also, in my opinion, the most accurate way to do it. And it just really helps me visualize the neckline because you are literally charting out the whole thing. So you can see the actual schedule of your decreases and whether or not that it's going to be equal or actually look nice. So I did this for the size that I am currently knitting for my sample size. But down here, all of these different tabs are the other sizes. So when I need to do the grading for the neckline, I will just go to these other sizes and chart out the neckline in this exact way. And the way that I did this was I figured out how many rows I wanted the neckline or the neck depth to be based on my row gauge and how deep I wanted the neckline to be, and how many stitches I wanted it to be based on the width using my stitch gauge. So from there, just figure out, if you have, for example, 14 rows that you want to take up in your decreases, and you have, let's say, 42 stitches to decrease, then you can figure it out by kind of charting them out this way so that you know how many stitches you need to decrease each time in order to fulfill the 14 rows that you need to take up with the decreasing. So hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, so that is my kind of starting folder. There will probably be other, most likely more spreadsheets, charting out other things. There might be a couple more documents, but for the most part, the basics are a document for the actual pattern, document for the Ravelry page, and then a grading spreadsheet. So yeah, that is the basics of my pattern design organization. Okay, and then last for this video, I wanted to share some book resources that I found very helpful. So the first one is Knitwear Design Workshop by Shirley Payton, and this is what it looks like. This is probably the best book that I have found. It is 4th of July, so I'm not sure if you can hear those fireworks. Yeah, this is definitely my favorite book for understanding clothing design and how things fit on your body and how things should fit, as well as understanding how your knitting relates to that and how to structure your knitting so that it fits your body. So this is kind of an example of how in-depth it goes. There are all of these different body measurements that are illustrated, which makes it really easy to understand what she's referring to. And then I'll give you an overview of the table of contents as well. Oops. So the way that she has this kind of sectioned out, so she breaks down a lot of different kinds of your basic sweaters. So a classic silhouette, as well as drop shoulder, modified drop shoulder, double tapered, single tapered, reverse tapered, and then a bunch of different types of cardigans. She also talks about skirts and dresses. She also talks about armhole shaping, sleeves, necklines, neckbands, finishing techniques, as well as steps for planning your designs, and selecting your fabric and how your fabric's going to behave based on the yarn and the stitch pattern that you chose. So this one's so helpful. I definitely recommend it. I got it from my library. Will probably be purchasing whenever I can. But yeah, she just really, here's kind of an example. You've got the schematic, and then she only uses one sample size, but she really goes through exactly her thought process behind doing certain things, and then also exactly how that would be knitted up, so you really get a feel for not only how, you know, you're not only understanding like the formula and the reason behind doing certain things, but you're also getting a step-by-step on how to actually knit them. So this one's my favorite by far. I definitely recommend this one. And then a couple others. This is Sweater Designed in Plain English by Maggie Righetti. This one's a pretty old one, and it's also a very popular one. And this is a great book. This is more of like a conversational style read. It's less of like a reference book in my opinion. But she also goes through all the different types of sweaters and talks about a lot of it, from what I have found, is what she has determined the best technique or the best way to do something. For example, her chapter on raglans includes a formula that she has figured out and has decided it's kind of like the best way or the best fitting way to make a raglan. But yeah, she has a bunch of different types of sweaters as well, and just goes through each construction, and she kind of adds something to each one. So if she's doing a cardigan, maybe she'll add like a shawl collar to it and explain it that way, and maybe on her vest she'll explain a v-neck, you know, stuff like that. So it's not so much split up into like necklines and sleeves and, you know, that kind of thing. It's more like each chapter is a different garment that she's designing, and she's just kind of taking you along the ride, and kind of talking through her thought process behind designing each garment. So this one's another great one to pick up. It's pretty inexpensive on Amazon. And then another one, this is another popular one, but this is The Knitter's Handy Sweater Book of Patterns by Anne Budd. This is essentially a pattern book, and so for the majority of the book, actually I think that's all the book is different types of sweaters. I was reading the word shoulders, I said that. Different types of sweaters charted out based on gauge and size. And so this is, all of these patterns are like one way to do it. So this is not the only way to do it. This is just one way to do it. But she breaks it down all the way to like giving you instructions before the chart. So you have all of the numbers as well as the instructions. And so if you wanted to just knit a sweater straight from these instructions, you can. And then she also, for each style of sweater, she also includes like a fully written out pattern. So you can kind of get an understanding of it, as well as, again, knit it. And you can just work off of that pattern, and then fill in your numbers from the charts that she has. So this is handy if you are stuck on something and you're just like, I just want, like, just give me a number, or just give me a way to do it and I'll do it, and then I'll figure out if I want to modify it or change it in any way. That's what I find this helpful for, because again, this just shows you one way to do it, and it's not always the best way, and I've found, but I mean, you will certainly come out with a sweater, and it will teach you the basics of how sweaters work, and also how to, not necessarily how to grade, but it will kind of teach you how to figure out what measurements and what numbers you'll need when you do end up grading. So I definitely recommend just purchasing it. It's a really nice one to have on your bookshelf if you plan on designing sweaters, or even just knitting yourself a sweater and kind of designing it for yourself. Those were my book recommendations. I do have a few more books that I use that I will probably talk about at some point. But those are kind of the main ones that I find very useful, especially that design workshop one. Definitely check it out. It's a great one. It has helped me understand sweaters so much. So that's it for me. Hopefully you found this interesting, and I hope it was helpful. If it was, give me a thumbs up or let me know in the comments if you would like to see more videos like this. I had a lot of fun making it. So yeah, I will talk to you next time.